Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Streamed and Screened, an entertainment podcast about movies and TV from Lee Enterprises. I'm Terry Lipshetz, a senior producer at Lee and co-host of the program with our band leader, Bruce Miller, editor of the Sioux City Journal and a longtime entertainment reporter. So if you're John Lennon, does that make me Ringo?
Paul McCartney.
Oh, I'm McCartney.
You get to be the big one. Why not? Go for the good one, right?
Exactly. So music, Taylor.
This is the week. Did you know this? If you were a Swiftie, you would know these kinds of things. And that is that Taylor Swift's movie is coming out in the next week, and it's based on her Eras tour. What I like to look at this as, those of us who couldn't afford or get tickets to her tour will be able to see it without having to really bust a hump.
That's the best part to me about concert films, is that it's a great way to get you to the show if you can't get to the show. Because sometimes, like some of these tour stops, and I mean, you're in Iowa, so for you, how often you'll get shows, sure, come to Iowa, but
not something this big.
Right.
No.
Yeah, you got to travel. You got to go to Chicago or Minneapolis.
I had friends tell me they spent $12,000 to see Taylor Swift.
Holy cow.
$12,000. Someday this will sound like I'm absurd thinking that that's a lot of money, but in this day, it's a lot of money. That it factors in the price of the tickets, the cost of getting there, the hotel room you have to have. I mean, it's like, I don't know that there's anybody on this earth that I would spend $12,000 to see.
I don't have that kind of spending cash.
But knowing that it is coming out on film, on DVD, I'm sure eventually, all those kinds of things. It's an opportunity for all of us to enjoy whatever it was that was put out there, and then maybe be even a little more critical about what they saw, because I think they were all caught up in the enthusiasm of the moment.
Right.
So I don't know. Maybe it isn't that good. Maybe 44 songs is too many. Who knows?
It sounds like, from what I've heard, it's a really good show. I've seen a lot of clips of it. If you like Taylor Swift, I think it's definitely a show you want to see. I keep hearing 44 songs, but it's not like she performs them in full.
Snippets.
There's some snippets here and there, and she kind of goes through the eras. No word if there's ranch dressing involved. Did you hear about this? No. So she's dating or at least seeing Travis Kelce from the Kansas. You can't escape that, right?
Oh, right.
So every little thing she does now gets dissected. And on social media, they were looking when she was at the Chiefs game in her luxury suite. Somebody spotted a picture of her with a chicken finger on a plate with what appeared to be ketchup and then a white substance that was labeled as seemingly ranch. So ranch dressing companies are like running with it. Taylor eats ranch dressing.
Who knew that she had such clout, right?
Right. It's crazy. Anything she does.
When she was here, she did play here way back in the early days when she was considered a country artist, if
Sure.
you dare say that. And the thing I found most amazing about her is that she didn't do her T-shirt in one style. She did the look of it in like 5 different colors. So these fans would want all 5 of them. And
Yep.
I thought that is a brilliant marketing decision by somebody, that you weren't just getting the tour shirt, you were getting all of them. Because
Yes.
if I'm going to get one, I got to have them all. What color do I pick? How do I pick? What am I going to do? So marketing genius. I think she's far more skilled at selling herself than she is at anything else. And that is not a diss. That means that she is just a genius at it.
Right.
She should be teaching this at Harvard.
Well, with me, I'm a record collector, and because you've seen my music collection and stuff in
Right.
the background. Taylor, it extends to releasing physical media. So with the album, actually all of her recent albums, she'll release it on vinyl on a standard black edition.
Limited edition, probably.
Limited, but the black is always, that's standard. You can get that
Okay.
anytime you want. But then there is a different colored version that you can buy at Target. And then you can buy, 4 different versions with 4 different album covers on 4 different colors through her website. And she puts them up at these intervals, like for the next 48 hours only, you can buy this one, and then it goes away. And then people freak out because they're like, you're making me buy it multiple times and you're charging me shipping multiple times. Why can't you just put them all up? But people will do that. I've seen people on social media sharing out, she's only got, it's not like she's got 35 albums. It's like she's got a solid catalog of like a dozen different albums or so, but each one has like 5 or 6 or 10 variants. Like you could literally have a collection of 200 Taylor Swift records, and it's just, like a dozen albums at this point, which is kind of
unreal. That is so
crazy.
Unreal.
And people buy it, like Taylor's Army, they will buy it, and it's insane. And I, like, as I said, I'm a record collector. I do have multiple copies of certain albums, but it's less about like I need a black version and I need a green version and a red version. It's like I've got, the original pressing, an early pressing of Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen. I have a Japanese copy. I have a UK copy. They're pressed in different places, so the sound might be a little bit different.
Are they unplayed? Do you like keep them so that nobody touches them?
No, I play them. So they're all, and that's a little bit of the difference with like some of the Taylor Swift fans is they might play one copy, but then they've got 13 that sit on a shelf or they hang on a wall or something.
That could end up being the Beanie Babies of our era.
It's going to be.
Era. Should I say eras?
Eras, yes. Beanie Babies of our eras. So, but yeah, like shameless self-promotion, Bruce. If you do want to check me out on social media, my Instagram handle is @vinyl_Terry, and you can just see what music I'm listening to at any given moment.
I will look. That's great.
Check it out.
The Beehive is also, or the Bayhive, I should say, is going to have its film in December. So Beyonce, once she sees what Taylor does, she's got to do one better.
It's and her strategy is a little different. So with Taylor, she's a little bit on hiatus at the moment. She's taking a small break in her tour.
Football season.
Right. Well, she goes, I think in another month, she heads down to South America. She's going to do like Argentina and all that. So her film is going to drop October 13th, I believe. And then with Queen Bey, her tour is over. So she's going to drop hers on, I believe it's December 1st, and it's going to air in theaters on Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays for about 4 weeks. So it's going to be like a limited run, month of December, but her tour is done. So it's not about, you
can't go back.
You can't this is, you either saw it and want to relive the moment, or you missed it and here's your opportunity. Whereas with Taylor, this is just it's just another opportunity to see her, and then you can, fly off to South America, or you can wait for her to circle back in North America next summer.
We've got to spend $12,000 and follow her around.
Yeah.
And then go to all the Chiefs games to make sure that we see that in case she happens to wave to the audience from the skybox. You know how it is. Well, I must tell you, I have followed these kinds of films for years. Going back to Woodstock was probably the first good concert-ish film because it did give you a sense of it and made me glad I never went there because I don't think I could have withstood mud and all that kind of whatever crap was there. But I was invited. I was in California one summer, and I was invited. I think it was summer. It either was summer or January, but it was the preview of One Direction's film. One Direction had a film called This Is Us, I think it is. This Is Us.
Okay.
And they were having this sneak in the Grove, which is a kind of upscale shopping center in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And somehow the word got out that this was going on, and all these little girls who were fans of One Direction gathered there. They were outside this theater like you couldn't believe. It was like the scene in Frankenstein where the villagers are going to storm the castle because they want in, and they had heard that One Direction was going to be there, that they were going to turn up for this screening that they weren't invited to, that they couldn't get into. And so I'm sitting in the theater, right? And we get the manager of the theater looking just really whipped. And he says, whatever you do, do not leave your seat. If you leave your seat and you leave the theater, you will not get your seat back, because if somehow they break in and they start sitting in the seats where there aren't people, we can't kick them out. We have no way of doing it. So please do not leave your seat. And we heard people pounding at the door outside, and this made news. You'll find, if you want to go back and look it up, pounding at the door, insisted that Harry Styles was in there somewhere, and we were keeping them from meeting him. It was unlike any situation I've ever been in that's a preview of anything. Was the movie okay? I have no clue. I know that I was worried that I was going to be beaten by a 12-year-old at some point, because I was in there sitting and watching this movie that meant so much to them, but they weren't.
Wow. And they didn't show up, right?
They were out there, but the cops came, and the cops kept them and got them out of the theater, so they were not in the theater at all. Oh. And then when we walked out, you could see that there was like this, who was in there? Who was in there with you? Did you see Niall? Was he in there with you? The kids were real questioning. I thought they could kill people. I think they really could kill people.
They probably could. If you're determined.
And so then I said, oh, it was wonderful. You've got to see this film. It's just so good. Yeah.
Yeah. Woodstock, though, that's probably the first concert film I had ever seen. It was actually one, I'm trying to think when my dad let me see it, because it's a little, there's some language in it. There's some drug use in it. There's definitely some nudity in it. And it may have even been the first movie I had seen with like nudity, but it's really a fascinating look at what went on. I think my dad always had a real connection with it too, because he bought tickets with friends to Woodstock.
You're kidding.
Yeah, he didn't get to it. He got stuck on the New York State Thruway and eventually had to turn around because they couldn't, they left a little too late, on whatever day it was, and by that time it was crazy. People had stormed the grounds. It had become a free concert, and he was angry. So he did what any other person who bought a ticket to something.
The tickets.
He sent it back and got a refund, and he regrets it.
No,
he regretted it for the rest of his life, because it was, he wished he could have had that ticket stub of like, I actually bought a ticket and I couldn't get there. But yeah, it was all of his favorite bands were playing. It's an incredible thing. So I think he always wanted us to, my siblings, to really feel that connection with him, with Woodstock. But it's a fascinating film too, because Woodstock, up until that movie, was just a financial disaster. And it took that movie to kind of like help them break even, basically.
Well, and it showed you how acts that they weren't counting on turned out to be the stars, really.
Right. Yeah.
Made their fortunes for them. Whereas other ones that they were counting on, it's like, well, not so sure here. This is not necessarily the star.
Yeah, and who, not a director of the film, but one of the film editors of it. Do you know what famous
was
director?
it Scorsese?
Scorsese was one of his earliest works, was as a film editor on Woodstock.
See what happens?
Yeah.
See what happens when you're available and you can get to that place?
Right?
If your dad had gotten there only, but he wouldn't have gotten a T-shirt because they probably weren't selling any.
Yeah. But Marty, and we know Martin Scorsese by Marty, because we're buddies.
He's one of our pals, right?
Right. But he's got a long history in doing movies, documentaries about, musicians. He directed The Last Waltz, which was the final concert of the band. He did No Direction Home, which was the documentary about the early life of Bob Dylan. It was that they captured him leaving Minnesota and then going to New York and kind of rising through the folk scene, and then it kind of ended when he plugged in. He did a documentary on George Harrison. Did you ever see the one he did called Rolling Thunder Review, a Bob Dylan story? Do you remember that one?
No.
So he directed this, and it was the most bizarre thing. So it's based on Dylan's concert tour during, I think it was 1975. It was a transitional stage in Dylan's career. but he went out with this like huge group of people of, it was like 20 people on stage. It was almost like a circus. Dylan painted his face. He had like white makeup on every night and wore a big hat. And it captures a lot of those performances. But the film that Scorsese did was almost part fiction because it plays into the myth that is Dylan. And it talks like, I think Sharon Stone was in it, and she talks about how she was a groupie but she wasn't. She wasn't on the tour with Dylan at all. But it's they added in, for whatever reason, different moments of fiction to what was actually supposed to be a documentary of his tour in the mid-'70s. So it's kind of a crazy, crazy thing. Yeah.
How powerful is the Cox network? So powerful that one day the internet will let your doctor perform miracles from thousands of miles away.
Connecting to remote operating room.
Giving a whole new meaning to the term house call.
Operation complete.
The Cox network. With gig speeds everywhere, it's internet built for tomorrow, today. Cox, bringing us closer. In Cox serviceable areas, speeds vary and are not guaranteed. Cox terms apply. Other restrictions may apply.
One that I'm fascinated by is the Michael Jackson one. It was supposed to be about his last concert tour, and they kind of created it into that tour. I mean, if you were there, you would see all of the numbers that they were planning to do. But you realize in the course of that somewhere, there was no way he was going to be able to produce this every night. He couldn't. He didn't have the energy. He didn't have the stamina. I mean, it was fascinating when they did each number. But you'd think somebody's got to go get, some oxygen at some point because it's just way too much. And it's telling because it shows how talented he was, but also how old he was. And the idea that you can do that, maybe past your prime is, unreal. But if you haven't seen that one, please watch it because it's just, it's unbelievable. This is it, right? Yeah. And that came out in 2009. I remember watching that one, and it was really fascinating because it took you inside of the prep for the tour. But it was also really sad too because you were seeing his decline basically too. Yeah.
At the time, like obviously in retrospect, when you see it, you're like, well, okay, that makes sense. But at the time, you probably didn't even realize that he was nearing the end of his life.
Right. Well, and I think it's one of those things where he thought too, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to be able to do this. This isn't going to happen. Instead of doing it once and doing it film it, and then you never have to do it again, why not?
Right.
Do you remember when HBO was real big about doing these live specials? And there was a Diana Ross one, live from Central Park. And it started to rain. And it was like the worst rain ever. And not as bad as the one they've had recently, but it was bad so that the people were like, well, she just kept on going. She was the Energizer Bunny and wouldn't let it up. And come on, everybody, sing with me, And it's like, wow, this is real. But it is, I think they like that document of their time because it is a way to mark certain hallmarks of their career. And then also it's a way for fans to say, you know what? She or he really was that good.
Yeah, I won't watch every concert documentary out there, but if it's a musician that I at least either like or respect, I like to check it out because it's always a good time capsule to kind of see what happens. An interesting one for me is The Song Remains the Same, the documentary concert film about the Led Zeppelin's tour from 1973, where they filmed it at Madison Square Garden. And here is that band at really the height of their popularity, right? It's middle of their career, things are crazy, and it captures the moment. And that came out in 76. And then years later, they did another concert film, and it's called Celebration Day, and that came out in 2012. Now, this is after John Bonham had died, and after John Bonham died, the band broke up, and they swore we're never getting back together. And there were little things here and there, like, Robert Plant and Jimmy Page did a side project together, but they never really went back out. I think they had that one-off, like at Live Aid, where they came together and played, but they never again really did any sort of tour or anything. They swore we're never going to reunite. But then they ended up doing a benefit concert at the O2 Arena in London. And it was just a one-off. And they said, we're going to do it. We're doing this benefit. It's for one of their early managers or promoters. And, so that's the only reason we're going to do it. And it sold out in minutes. And the cool thing about it, though, is that they brought in Jason Bonham, who is John Bonham's son, to play on drums. And I always thought it was cool watching that concert because, you knew that this is it. You're not going to be able to see him again. They're never going to get back again. But they opened it up with the song Good Times, Bad Times. And it was very much like a drum-driven song. So it's we're going to open it up. We're going to let Jason Bonham kind of take center stage in honor of his dad kind of thing. And then they kind of tore through, 16 songs after that. So it was a really nice moment. And there's a band that, kind of had at two ends of the spectrum, like one at the height of craziness in the 70s. And then one is, we're like grandparents now. And but this is us. We're going to get back to one more time. We're going to honor a friend of ours and do it one more time. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, and we look at the Beatles really did concert films too. They just did them more like music videos.
Right.
With all of their kind of Help and you name it, Let It Be, all that kind of stuff had a moment. They never really sat it down and did something that we're seeing a lot of now. But so we still have that kind of record of their time on Earth. The Rolling Stones, however, had Give Me Shelter. And do you get any in that? That was like, wow.
Yeah.
Those times, I don't know that I would have been eager to go to those concerts at the time. But in retrospect, as an older person with more, hopefully, smarts about what I'm doing, I can appreciate it much more than I would have at the time. I would have been worried about getting out. Are we getting out in time? Is the parking going to be bad? Do I have to worry about all that? You know what I mean? It's just, so now it's fun, a lot of fun to watch it, and especially when they're still performing. I'm sure every move they make now when they're in concert is photographed somewhere, somehow. We didn't have social media back in the day, so everybody wasn't holding a phone up and recording it. They were just appreciating what it was at the time.
The Beatles, it's an interesting example because they had several movies that are still popular to this day, like A Hard Day's Night. And there were concert elements within the film, but it was more of a traditional film, but it captured Beatlemania at the height of Beatlemania. So if you weren't there in the 60s to experience Beatlemania, even though it's kind of a lighthearted film, you still got the essence of it. And then you got some of the goofiness and like with Help and all that. But it's really a shame with them because they stopped touring in the mid-'60s because they couldn't hear themselves. And if you ever get a chance, I have like a bootleg DVD of their Shea Stadium concert. And it's the craziest thing. It's like a 25-minute concert. I mean, that's all their concerts were back there. They would do, 20 songs in 25 minutes, and then they were done.
Wow. I've been to the theater, the Ed Sullivan Theater, where they did their big performance on television, the first one. And the place is small. It's really small. And I remember seeing people in the balcony, like they were jumping up and down and were so excited that they thought it was going to come down. And you realize, wow, we were really kind of duped back in the day, thinking that it was just this huge Madison Square Garden kind of experience. And it was just a small theater, but, the cameras made it look like it was much bigger than it actually was.
If you ever get a chance in New York City, you take the NBC Studios tour, and they usually will take you to a couple different sets, including, it's like they always do Saturday Night Live, and then they'll give you like one or two. And I remember when I took the tour one time, we went to the Saturday Night Live set, and you're just kind of blown away because you realize you actually can't see some of, if you're in that studio audience, because of the way they have to arrange the floor, they might be filming part of it off to the side where the audience can't actually see it because you have to watch it on monitors. You just see like where they come out for the monologue and you see where the band performs, but then some of the other configurations are all over the place. And then we also went out to, I think it was Conan O'Brien's when he was still, it was before he got, the Tonight Show, and
Sure.
he had that late night program. And I remember going there and, we saw the Max Weinberg drum kit sitting out there and Conan's desk, but it's tiny. It's a tiny little theater.
Right. Oh,
yeah.
Sneaky. Yes. You mentioned Saturday Night Live. I was lucky enough to have been there during the early years. I saw an episode that, I don't know if you remember any of these things, but there was a dance that Gilda Radner and Steve Martin did. And they were like going all around the whole area. And they came near me and I was able to get on camera at some point with them. So if you ever have access to that, go back and look. But it was fascinating because you could not see all of the skits. There could be a skit right down below you,
Right.
but you can't lean in and look at that. And so you'd basically get to see a couple, and that's about it. But the flurry of activity that's going on between the skits is just, it's amazing. And then the sound is really, really good for the guest artist, whoever is singing that week or whatever. It's really, really good. But and so a couple of times I've gotten to go to Saturday Night Live. It's like the most impossible ticket to get because they will, at best, you're going to get a rehearsal ticket at this point because they do a rehearsal before they do the final show.
Right.
And somehow they'll let people in there, but you really need to know somebody if you're going to go to the actual show itself. So put that on a bucket list. It's really worth it. You had mentioned back a little bit earlier about the O2, this huge venue in London.
Right.
And, every year it seems they're rerunning this on PBS, and that's the Les Mis anniversary special. And it's just unbelievable. I love the show Les Miserables as a musical. It's wonderful. But they combined a whole bunch of old stars, people who had been in it before, made this kind of masterful thing. And then you saw these people walking up the aisles of this show. And it was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And those are those once-in-a-lifetime experiences that somehow need to be captured on film. But the O2 is a place where they all play at some point. Look at all the things they did when Prince Charles and
sure.
when Queen Elizabeth had her anniversary. You name it, they did something there. And it's a place I'd love to go to just to see what it's like in person.
Yeah, that would be a fun one. And then you think about like entertainment destinations now too, with the Sphere in Las Vegas with U2. And U2, because U2 is such a visual band that they're able to utilize the interior. I mean, that's just amazing. It's just a giant LED screen, basically.
Right.
But, they had a concert film as well. I don't know. Do you remember Rattle and Hum?
Oh, yes. I think didn't we get it free? If you had like some Apple product, they gave it to you.
I don't know. You might have. But no, I think that might be something else. But Rattle and Hum came out in, I think it was 1988. And it was a combination album. It was like a live album that came out after the Joshua Tree, and it also had a companion film that went with it. The companion film, some people love it, some people hate it. I don't know if there's very many people that are kind of like in the middle on this one. It's really bizarre. So it's, on one hand, you get a lot of performances from the Joshua Tree tour, which was really, at that point, they had a few earlier albums that did well. They were, critically acclaimed, but they didn't necessarily explode commercially. But the Joshua Tree exploded commercially, and they had huge hits. So they documented parts of this tour, and they shot a lot of it in black and white. But then near the end, they went into color. But then they had these intermittent, weird side journeys, where they went to Graceland and they talked about their love for Elvis, and they met with BB King, and they did this and they did, And it was just kind of a strange document of the time. Like, it wasn't, I would have been happier with just give me 25 songs of a straight U2 concert. If you got to take a few performances from a few different shows, so be it. But I don't know. I could probably have done without, the side commentary. Yeah, exactly. Because it's very. I love U2, and I've seen them in concert, and I have all their albums. But Bono has a certain way about him, I guess, is a way of saying it, and it's just like they're a little bit too over the top sometimes, even for me. And I think Rattle and Hum really, it sums up that time, at least.
Even though all those little pop stars, Hannah Montana had a show, right? Bieber had one, I think it was 3D. So Katy Perry, you name them, they all get these movies at some point. And it's somebody saying, here's how we can make the budget on that tour that didn't go so well. We'll put out a movie, and then we'll make up the difference that we lost in going, having that big set piece that you had. There was a great mockumentary about Madonna's tour. Remember how Madonna had the cone bra and all that? And Julie Brown, not the Julie Brown that you remember from MTV, but a different Julie Brown, who was a comedian, did her spoof of Madonna's tour. And it was so, I think she called herself Medusa or something.
Okay.
But if you ever get to see that, it is such a hoot. It makes fun of these in the best way. The best way. And Madonna had to have loved it. And she's another one who should look at those things and say, I'm glad I have this document. I really am, because I don't know that her tours now are as iconic as they should be. Gaga, she has done things, she's done films or specials, but I don't know that she's done one of these kind of big movie things that would have told all or showed all or whatever. Yeah. And maybe she's ripe for one.
Maybe. You know which one I really like too, and this is an opportunity because I couldn't get to New York. And I'm a huge Springsteen fan, and then this is like my other
Broadway.
Yeah, my other shameless self-promotion, I have another Instagram account called @Bruce Springsteen Collection, where I document all of the Springsteen albums in my collection. And I'm not just talking about the regular stuff. I've got some things that were not officially released that I show off on this thing. But
does Bruce know?
Does Bruce? he knows this stuff is out there.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I'm a huge hardcore. I've seen him in concert 13, 14 times at this point.
Why didn't you go to the Broadway show? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to, but the cost for tickets, I got to travel from the Midwest to the city.
It's $5,000. That's all you need.
Yeah, it's an expensive show. So when Netflix made the deal to air, and one of the performances is Springsteen on Broadway, it was a really good opportunity. And I would have loved to have gone to the Walter Kerr Theater to see it live. But I think in this type of setting, the way they filmed it, you felt like you were right there. It was a very well done documentary-ish, whatever you want to call it. It captured the moment. It was kind of like when with Hamilton, because if you couldn't see the original cast, you at least got to see it on Apple TV. And I think that was a good second opportunity. And I think that's what this is.
I told you my story about Hamilton, right? That I was determined to see Hamilton no matter what.
No, I don't think I heard this one.
Oh, do you mind if I
go ahead?
A little story. The thing about me is I have to see the original cast. I have to see the original actor in a Broadway show, or I don't feel like if it's a big thing.
Sure.
And I knew that Hamilton was going to be a big thing even before Hamilton was a spark on anybody's radar. And then it got out there. And I thought, I've got to go. But when am I going? And how do I get tickets? And it was like this whole thing where I couldn't get the tickets. The tickets were just outrageous. And I decided I was going to go on StubHub.
Oh.
And so StubHub, I went on, and it was like $1,000 something for the tickets. And am I going to spend $1,000? And then I started rationalizing all these things. Well, life is short. You're not going to be around that much longer. You want to see it. You should go. The original cast was breaking up after that. I mean, I rationalizing,
It
right?
played out. You played it out like 15 steps, and you're like, I'm on board.
And it got down to the point where it was $777.
Oh, you got to do it.
And I did it. I jumped, and then I was at a hotel, and we had to have, you know how this thing is where you print out the tickets, but you're not really sure about all this, and you think, oh, they're going to take me to the cleaners, and I'm going to lose $700, and it's going to be just the worst, right?
Yep.
And so I get to the business office at the hotel, and they said, yeah, you know, these are pretty good. You should be all right. You shouldn't have a problem. But if I were you, I'd get to the theater early, because if somebody sold this ticket twice, which could happen,
yep,
you won't be the one who gets in. It'll go with the one who got in before you. I made a beeline to that theater as fast as I could. And when I heard that boop of the ticket, it was like, yes. So I get to my seat, and the seat was really, really, really good. And I'm talking to the people next to me, and there was a family from Los Angeles who came because the daughter had been listening to the album all along and wanted to see this, right? This was her goal. And they gave up going to any other shows. They weren't going to any kind of theme parks. They weren't doing anything but Hamilton. And they spent $10,000. And they were sitting next to me. And then we talked to people like in the row before us. They spent nothing. Somebody handed them tickets at the theater. So there were all these kind of stories that were going around among the people, and you felt lucky. You felt like, I have won the lottery. I am here. And then you hear dun, 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 and you think, this is like the most unbelievable experience I've ever been in my life. It was everything and then a little bit more. And I'll tell you, and at intermission, I ran to the merchandise table and bought $200 worth of crap just because I wanted to prove that I had been to Hamilton, right? So it was my thing. And I realized, you know what? It was money well spent. It was really money well spent. Now, when I saw the Apple version the Disney version, Disney Plus version of Hamilton, it was perfect. It lived up to all of the things that I remember, because after that cast, the original cast left, I did go see it again, and it did not live up to the hype. But having seen the original cast and then seeing the original cast do the filmed version of it, it was, if you want to know how good it was, watch that. It was very good, and I think they did a great job of capturing that whole moment. But yeah,
that's cool.
My Hamilton story. So for the next year after that, I got more Hamilton crap from people because they said, well, you're the one that really likes Hamilton, don't you? Here's a Hamilton whatever. But I had talked to Lin-Manuel Miranda before he was even writing it. He was on a TV series as like a third stringer. And I said, well, what are you working on? Because he had done some other stuff for the theater. And that, if you know anything about me, I'm just a hardcore theater person. I live for that. And he said, well, I'm working on a little thing I call the Hamilton mixtape. It's a show about Alexander Hamilton, but it's done with rap and hip hop and that kind of stuff. He says, we'll see where it goes. And well, look where it went.
We'll see where it goes. Like, I don't know, it may pan out. Who knows, It's
a fascinating story. And then to even take it further, while he was doing Hamilton, he was writing the songs for Moana.
Oh.
And he would do Zoom calls with the directors of Moana, who one of them happens to be from Sioux City. And
really?
He would tell me about how, he'd come out, before they start the show or during an intermission or whatever, and they would like work it. Well, this song needs to be this, and this song needs to be that. Okay, I'll work on it, and I'll get you another one. And then he'd go out and do the show.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's weird. But there's your 2 cents worth on those kind of direct to the screen versions. But I think, you know what? I think these are ways for all of us to enjoy entertainment that we maybe don't have the access to.
Absolutely.
It's an affordable way.
Yep.
And you still get all the bells and whistles. And even if you had a bad seat at the show itself, if you did go, here's a way to see things that maybe you didn't see.
Yeah. And it's a cool way too, because it captures the moment of the time. So if you're like me, who I'm in my later 40s and I was born after Woodstock, I can see what people of my parents' age looked like and acted like as youngsters, and realized that, some of the things that they yelled at me for, they were doing them also back in. Yep.
As someone who was around,
Yep.
I will tell you, they were just as bad, if not worse, than we see kids today.
Yep, exactly. And then I look back at something like 1991, the film The Year Punk Broke, which looks at bands like, Sonic Youth and Nirvana when they exploded in the early 90s. And I watched those and I'm like, oh, did I really dress that way in high school?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It's fascinating. I was talking to a college student today, and she was doing a project for one of her design classes. And she says, I am going back to the 70s, and I'm trying to kind of conjure all of those things that were big in the 70s. And I said, some of these things that you're coming up with weren't in the 70s. So you just have to be a little careful because I don't remember this stuff, and I remember the 70s like nobody.
You do. Yep. You absolutely remember them. So again, we've got October 13th, Taylor Swift's The Eras Tour film coming out. Beyoncé has her film coming out in December. And check out some of these films that we talked about today. Great opportunities like, Woodstock, Rattle and Hum, The Last Waltz. A lot of, like, Scorsese has done a lot of, if you're into Marty, like I am, he's got a lot of things besides the gangster films. He loves music, and it plays into all of his films, and he's done quite a few. So a lot of good things there.
And he's got a new movie coming up.
He's got a new movie coming up. And then we have another episode coming out next week. You have an interview with that, right?
With Goosebumps. Yeah, get ready. We're getting closer to Halloween. And they've rebooted Goosebumps. They had a series where they would do a different book for each episode. Now they've created a kind of a mashup where they put the characters together, and they're telling stories from 4 or 5 different books in the course of a season. And you'll get a chance to hear the producers talk about why they did what they did with this. And it's a little more adult than you may remember the Goosebumps book being. So look for that. That's next week when we come back on Streamed and Screened.
Sounds good. So we'll talk about Goosebumps, and we'll talk about maybe some other family-friendly-ish kind of Halloween things that we can dive into.
If you must. If you're not, we're talking about Saw.
I will tap out. If we're talking horror movies, I am tapping out before we get started. We won't do Saw. None of that stuff. I like to get a solid night's sleep, Bruce. I don't need horror things flashing through my head. That stuff's scary. I don't like scary things.
Yeah, we'll play the Springsteen white noise machine, and you'll be able to go to sleep.
Sounds good. All right, we'll be back again next week with another episode of Streamed and Screened.